My clients often share their struggles to feel confident and fluent in English in the real world. They say things like, "Tanya, English is so difficult for me." Or, "I try to say what I'm thinking, but then I get stuck and I feel so embarrassed." Trust me, I know how you feel because I've been there myself. In fact, I continue to be there. I am evolving my Portuguese skills, and I speak with native Brazilian Portuguese speakers from Rio de Janeiro on a weekly basis. And every week I get this sense of, gosh, I wonder if I'm using Portuguese correctly. Sometimes I think, was that Portuguese or was I speaking Spanish? I wonder if they understood me. So I really do feel and sympathize with you if this is your case as well. And that's why I've decided to create this video, just to give you a little bit of motivation and show you 5 aspects of English grammar that are much simpler than other languages, especially Portuguese, French, German, sort of Western languages. And I recently filmed a video on how English became the global language of business that it is today, where I mentioned this reality that structurally speaking, English is simpler than other languages because of historical facts. So I'll leave a link for that video in the description box below for you to explore later. But in this video, let's explore 5 grammatical aspects of English that make it relatively simple, although, of course, learning is a subjective experience and can vary according to the individual and the language backgrounds. Hello, or hello again. Welcome to the channel. My name is Tanya Meyer. I'm the founder of Confident English Training, operating at the intersection between effective language acquisition and use in real-life situations, the practice of awareness raising, and increased levels of happiness, joy, and well-being. What's not to love? Right, let's get straight into it with number 1. And that is that in English, there is no grammatical gender. And let me tell you that this is one aspect of learning, for example, Spanish or Portuguese, that English speakers find really confusing, because nouns in English don't have genders, whereas in those other languages, nouns are assigned either masculine, feminine, or neutral. And this requires agreement with articles and adjectives and pronouns. English simplifies this and makes it far less complex. For example, in French, book is masculine, le livre, and table is feminine, la table. Which brings me to the next simple aspect of English, which is that there is only the definite, the indefinite, or zero article. Those are the only options when it comes to articles. Now, I know that the definite article, the, creates a lot of confusion for English speakers because in many other languages like Spanish and Portuguese, the is used to talk about everything. For example, I think this is the main point of confusion with the between English and Spanish, is that in English, if we're going to talk about things in general, we don't say the things in general, whereas in Spanish, there is an article for every noun. The difference then is that there are 4 articles in Spanish: the masculine, the feminine, the singular, and the plural. And in English, there are only 2, or perhaps even no article. So structurally speaking, English is simpler. What else? Well, we have the simplified verb conjugations of English. Whereas in other languages like Spanish, there's a different ending for each subject. So, for example, in Spanish, yo hablo, tú hablas, él habla, nosotros hablamos, and so on. In English, the only person that we conjugate is the third person singular by adding s or es, and that is in the present simple. But when it comes to the past, for example, the only thing that we do with regular verbs, and no matter who the person is to add ed. Whereas in Spanish and other languages, each person needs to be conjugated. So, in that sense, English is structurally simple. And although other languages don't use auxiliaries to conjugate or to use verbs, the fact that English does is a simple technique because there are only two auxiliaries, do and have. And it's the auxiliary that indicates time and person in English. And when I say time and person, it's either going to be have or has, so or do or does, right? And in the past, it's always going to be did or had with all people. So there isn't really all this need to memorize different endings for different people. The third aspect of English, which makes it structurally simple, is the fact that there's no distinction between formal and informal language. And this eliminates a whole different layer of language that needs to be learnt when you're speaking a language like Spanish or Portuguese or other languages where there is this distinction. In Spanish, for example, it's tú to talk about informality and usted to talk formally, and the whole structure changes depending on which one you're using. But in English, it isn't that there's no distinction between formality and informality. Yes, there is formality and informality in English, but it's expressed mainly through vocabulary. So to give an example, English uses a lot of phrasal verbs in informal settings, whether it's spoken or written. Phrasal verbs consisting of a main verb and a complement, whereas the single verb equivalent to phrasal verbs probably exists, but is usually more formal. So what happens when Spanish speakers or Portuguese, Italian, French speakers are learning English is that they sound very formal because they already have the one word equivalent of the verb, but English uses these phrasal verbs to indicate informality. Still, it is simpler structurally to the fact that English has no formal and informal structures. What do you think? Have you thought about these aspects of, even if you're one of those people who struggles with English grammar and you think, oh, this is so difficult, so different from my language. Have you thought about these aspects of grammar, of English grammar, that actually make it simpler than perhaps your language? And I really hope that this is inspiring for you and that you think, oh, well, hang on a minute. Yes, that's true. English is easier in this sense, at least. Comment below if you have any other, or if you've had any other experiences of learning or using English that are actually simpler, structurally speaking, than your own language. I'd love to hear from you. Let's start a discussion. Okay, continuing with this question of verb conjugation is the fact that narrative tenses, the way we use verbs in English, is also relatively simple compared to other languages because we have, strictly speaking, right, we've got two tenses, which are the present and the past. So the present is the infinitive form of the verb, and then with regular verbs, we just add ed to indicate the past, and that's all there is. As far as the future is concerned, many learners think, oh, we just use the auxiliary will and then the infinitive, I will go, I will sleep, I will eat. Well, I mean, yes, will is a way of indicating future, but it's not a conjugation. It's the use of an auxiliary. And it's not the only way we have of referring to the future. So there are many other ways, but there is no strict verb conjugation for the future. I might film a video about future forms in English. If this is something that interests you, leave me a comment in the box below. Say, yes, verb tenses, please, how to use future forms, and I'll do that. So we've got present and past as far as time, tense is concerned. And then to these tenses and the various strategies we have to indicate future, we can add aspect. And there are only two aspects, which are the continuous and the perfect. So, you know, if you see it in that way, that there are two tenses and two aspects, and a maximum combination of 12 tenses in English, then that is relatively simple compared to other languages. Of course, we do need to say that every language has its own complexities and challenges, and what might be considered simple or complex can vary according to the learner's native language and their individual language learning preferences. What do you think? What aspects of English grammar do you find particularly tricky? Let me know in the comments below and I'll film a video about it. In the meantime, if you're serious about upgrading and developing your English language skills, my Confident English training program helps advanced users of English improve the way you acquire and incorporate English into your everyday life by providing a clear path towards personalized, continuous English language development. Do check the links in the description box below. And remember that you can also download my free 30-page guide, How to Revolutionize Your English, with audio filled with ideas, tips, and strategies that you can implement straight away. I hope you like this video and that you find it useful. If you do, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and then I will see you in the next one. Take very good care until then. Bye for now.